Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get going now. It's just after 11, and welcome along to today's Tide Masterclass webinar, Successful Bookkeeping for Small Businesses. This is now, I think we are number 19 in the series, so really great to have you along. Really pleased to see a good number of people, some names I don't recognize, some I do. And if you're watching us live, that's great. But if you're watching us on the YouTube channel post-event, it's great that you found us too. So thank you for that. My name is Kuhn Hawker. I'm the event manager here at Tide. And for those of you who may be new to Tide, I just want to give you a quick overview of our services and what we do before we move on to the webinar. So if we can move on to the next slide, thank you. We're the fastest growing online business current account provider in the UK. We currently have over 200,000 members. And our aim is to provide our members with a service that saves them both time and money when it comes to their business banking. We're brilliant for SMEs, for startups, and for freelancers. There's no credit checks, startup or monthly fees. And so this allows you to try us out even alongside your current business account provider and see, where we can save you time and money as a direct comparison. The sign-up process itself is really simple. It takes between 5 and 10 minutes. Once you've gone through that process, you'll receive your sort code and account number, and you can start your banking straight away with your Tide card coming a few days later. When I started Tide and signed up, I put this to the test. I timed the sign-up process from start to finish for me, and it was 4 minutes and 37 seconds, which was quite impressive. So I was very pleased about that. The app itself, once you've signed up, really easy to set up and to use, and has a huge amount of in-app products that will make your banking life a lot easier as well. A few of my favorites, yes, I have favorites, include the ability to see exactly where your money has gone and when it went there through the auto categorization tool, easy for me to say. You're also able to send professional and fully customizable invoices from the app. So you can include your company logo and fully edit the email that you send out attached to that invoice. You're able to split the account into four main sub-accounts as well. So you can siphon money for tax, for marketing, for events, anything you want. It just makes it a lot easier then for you to deal with your business banking. And also the account allows you to have up to 30 cards on the one account as well. So anybody in the business can make company expenses. And those are really easy to track and really easy to manage and help with your bookkeeping, which is useful, especially as what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll talk to you a bit later about how to stay up to date with what we're doing here at Tide and how we're going to make it even easier for you to become a Tide member. But for now, I just want to give you a quick tour of Zoom as well. I can't imagine there's many people out there who haven't used Zoom, but just in case there is, depending on what you're viewing us on either the bottom or the top of your screen, there is a toolbar. So there's a chat room in there and a Q&A room. We'll be doing a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, please do get them into there. In the chat room, send us some love. You make some comments, anything you want, that's fine. But also I'll be putting some links into that chat room as we go through, from stuff the panel are discussing and links to our social channels towards the end of the session as well. So do please keep an eye out for those. So we'll now move on to introducing our lovely panel. I'm really pleased and honoured they've put aside some time for us today. And so we can move on to the next slide, please. I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Ali. Good morning, Ali.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me. So I'm Ali Travis, the VP of Business Services at Tide. I've been with Tide for, well, it's coming up to about 4 years now, so I'm one of the oldies who've been around for a long time. So Business Services at Tide is everything we do around financial admin. So this might be your invoicing, expenses, accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, tax, and so on. Tide does a little bit more than other challenger banks in this area. We try and help businesses with their financial admin, and I'm pleased to see Kieran mentioned a couple of his favorite features, invoicing, categorization, very much in this space. So I'm here to kind of give a little bit of perspective on how Tide approaches this problem of bookkeeping and what we're doing in this space.
Great, thanks, Ali. And Lee, good morning, Lee.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on board. My name's Lee Dyson, interim head of bookkeeping at A4G. And our mission statement at A4G is to be the best all-round advisors to own and manage businesses, and obviously one element of that is bookkeeping. I think we're trying to pride ourselves on the fact that we're providing a true proactive service, and as much as we all like to look at spreadsheets, ultimately that's a little bit of a history lesson, and we need to wisen up in terms of the way we do things, which we'll come on to shortly.
Great, thanks, Lee. And yeah, again, thank you for taking time out this morning to be part of this panel. Before we get on to the main part of the webinar, just sort of a couple of polls I wanted to run, if that's okay. So the first one is just giving us an idea of how many people are in your company, and so we know a bit more about who we're talking to this morning. So if you could all take it just a second or two just to give that poll some attention and click the answer that applies to you. That'd be great. And then I'm going to run a poll directly after this, so just bear with me, just for us to understand how you currently do your bookkeeping. I'll just give it a couple more seconds on this one. Thank you for you those who are taking part. So I'll end the poll there, and if you see the results there, so we've got obviously a high percentage of people that are self-employed, and obviously up to sort of 11 to 20 employees. And I'll just do the second poll if you don't mind, and there we go. Just want to give us an idea of who does your bookkeeping, whether you do it yourself or whether you have a third-party accountant bookkeeper. If you could again just take a couple of seconds. Say again, Ellie?
Very interesting. Look at that.
Yeah. So end poll, and I'll share those results. And so there we go. We've got a lot. The higher percentage by quite a way is that a lot of people are doing it themselves. So that's really interesting for us to know. Thank you very much. And let me just close that poll down. So we'll move on to the first slide, and I'm going to talk to Lee first of all. And Lee, thank you, as I said, once again for joining us. Ali will be talking a bit later about what tools and resources we have here at Tide to help with bookkeeping. But as an accountant, it would be great to hear your initial thoughts on how small businesses can make sure they have good bookkeeping practices in place.
Thanks, Kieran. I think are very interesting poll results that the majority are self-employed. And the vast overwhelming majority are sort of having a crack at doing it themselves. And I think that leads on quite nicely, because I think a number of the members will come into business for a variety of reasons, whether it's, you know, that entrepreneurial spirit, or perhaps, you know, they've just had enough of their boss and want to, you know, have a crack at it themselves. There's a lot of people out there that are very good and incredibly talented at what they do. And I think from that, it's almost, you know, I want to have a go and make my own living and be, you know, in control of my own destiny. And I think there's sort of different personalities there which come into that business owner, sort of either the very technical side, they're very good at what they do, or, you know, or the very entrepreneurial spirit. But I think there's a missing piece in terms of like the management of that business. Even if you're on your own, you need to fulfill all these different roles, and sort of being a manager of that business, or, you know, dipping into finance or dipping into HR if you've got employees, it's sort of the glue that sticks it all together, really. And I think that's important, that it could be one or two people involved in the business, but they need to have all these different hats on and spin all these different plates to make sure that business is really progressing and successful. There are some stats available in terms of, you know, some business, the majority of business wouldn't, you know, get beyond startup sort of terms, but, you know, what we want to do is get the support function in place for those businesses so they have the best opportunity to grow and prosper, ultimately for the owner that's managing it as well. And I think if we look at what success looks like, that's naturally going to be different for every different individual, both in personal life, business life, you know, running your own business. And I think a lot of people from a financial point of view will look at success at any point in their business, say, what's in my bank account? And I think when you get to that, you know, there's some pitfalls there. And I'll just take the more recent example that the pandemic's brought about to us. Those who are VAT registered and doing their bookkeeping would have completed their VAT return for sort of Q2 of this year, maybe March, April, or May, and they wouldn't have had to pay that bill. So, you know, that's great. That's stopped the outflow of cash, you know, at a time where everyone needs it a little bit, but that cash still needs to be paid out, although it's going to be in sort of 10 months time. So there needs to be, that money might be in the bank at the moment, but there should be alongside that some provision that's being made, maybe put a little bit of cash aside for each month 1 to month 10, just to build up so you've got that money available. There are a number of different mechanisms to do that, but I'm not going to steal Ali's thunder because I know he's going to come on to that. I think that the real most important aspect is nobody probably takes pleasure out of doing their bookkeeping, but it's vital in so much that it can give you the information, and that information is a key part of any decision-making process. Otherwise, I think we could describe it as best guess rather than an informed decision. And, you know, everyone's got a different appetite for risk, and I personally wouldn't want to be basing my business and the viability of my business on sort of necessary gut reaction. Although I do appreciate that, you know, that's the way some members will like to work, and they'll trust their instinct, and that's served them really well so far.
Great, thanks, Lee. That's a nice sort of starter into the world of bookkeeping for our attendees. There's obviously a lot of ways to do the bookkeeping here. We can move on to the next slide. But one of the main decisions I think you have to make is whether you do it yourself or you employ a third party. And it'd be interesting to hear your views, but as a as an accountant, maybe they're slightly skewed, but but it'd be great to hear your views regardless.
I don't know about slightly skewed. That poll result's anything to go, I'm going to be out of a job before then. But yeah, I think, as I alluded to, sort of, we're in a pandemic at the moment. Business has had some support from government, but only time will tell whether that's necessarily been enough for each individual member. But we can look at that in so much that some businesses have been really keen to sort of lean out their structure, lean out the costs, really avoid money going out the door. And, there's certainly commendable ways of doing that. But what I want to do is play a little bit of devil's advocate. And, we've got a lot of people with sort of 10 or under employees. I think that the poll result was pretty much 90 to 100% where I had sort of 5 or less employees. And, that's great. That's small owner managed businesses. There's that real passion, that drive for the members to do these things themselves. But when we've got that fewer number, I think, I'm going to take the owner director, for example, or, the proprietor of the business, and it might cost £25 an hour to get a bookkeeper in. And, you might, oh, that's a bit steep. I don't want to spend that money. I'm trying to save money at the moment. But what I'd put to you as playing that devil's advocate role would be, how much would you pay to get your best salesman in? How much would you pay to get your best technical director in? How much would you pay to get that person that, does all the sales and marketing? And I'd suggest that if you were to break it down and the number of hours that you're spending doing your own bookkeeping, and the opportunity lost to spend that time in driving your business forward, I suggest that it would be more beneficial than the £25 now or whatever arbitrary figure it might be. Obviously, it's variable depending on the nature of what's being done. So I think, it's time to perhaps look at that slightly bigger picture and not so much the cost going out, but what that's costing in and what's not potentially coming in. And that'll be different for each individual, it'll be different for each business. And it's probably a hybrid to be struck, that you wouldn't necessarily outsource everything, but you might retain ownership of making sure you're doing your invoices on that sort of immediately once you've done the job. We all lose a little bit of value as time goes on. If you've just had something done, or you've just enjoyed a good service, you're going to be looking at, I've really valued that. But a week down the line, and you've had all the stress of getting back to work, another week of bookkeeping that you've had to do, you might not value that so much. And the members' customers are no different there. So it's really important to get that invoicing out quickly. So you might retain control of that, and then just sort of the history book, the VAT, the transactional stuff, you might offload that, for example. And I think that the $64,000 question is, do you really need to do it yourself? And are you the only person in your business or even outside your business that can do this? Because, we've all been in a situation where we've got piles of paperwork, shoe boxes everywhere, everything's on top of the wardrobe. And it becomes a big task, and that's naturally going to dissuade some people from doing that. But if you can get help and, get an expert, or at least get a system in place that can help leverage your time, then I think that's only going to be positive for our members.
Greatly, thank you very much. That's again a really interesting part of bookkeeping covered off there. And I think moving on to sort of onto the next slide, and as with everything nowadays, there's a load of different tools out there that can help you with pretty much everything, including bookkeeping. Whether you have an accountant or not, do so. What do you think the main points around automation when it comes to bookkeeping?
I think the main question is, can you afford not to? I put into a sort of one of my experiences as an early trainee, just starting out, and I was sent to a client's premises for a day, and effectively they couldn't solve out they had a difference on the bank, so they had the old giant red cash books. And what happened is the bank statement comes in each month, wasn't available online, and then someone in their business was sort of write everything that's come in, everything that's gone out, allocate it to travel, allocate it to purchase. That's my drawings, that's my VAT bill, and so on and so on. So the bank statements come in, and let's be fair, the bank statement, it never lies. It's a record of what's gone in and what's gone out of your bank account. And it's, you might allocate that incorrectly. You might put something to travel and it was actually for entertaining or something like that. But generally speaking, what's come in's come in, and what's gone out has gone out. So this was just a repetition process for somebody, writing it down. And then my job was to spend a day trying to find out what they'd done and what they'd missed. So that's now, the history has actually happened in the bank account. Someone spent their time doing it, and now I'm spending my time at an extra cost to the client to try and decipher what's gone wrong. You know, I got to the end of that day and had made some progress, but there was still a difference. And I think you can all guess what I spent the next day trying to do as well. And I just think that's a really poor use of time, both sort of for the client and a poor use of their budget at the time as well, because there's so much easier and more reliable ways of doing it. So, you know, if we fast forward now, it's 2020, we've got cloud-based solutions. They've really come on leaps and bounds in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And it gets to the point where all the behind the scenes tech, which is far beyond my knowledge, I hasten to add, you know, it's drawing in the data, it's putting it there, and I can sit there and have a little bit, invest a little bit of time and create some rules so that anything that comes through from B&Q is going to go to purchases, and anything that comes through from, you know, Sainsbury's is going to go to office expenses, you know, that sort of thing. So then all I'm doing for each point thereafter is I'm going to go through and spend a little bit of time and chunk it nice and easily and go, yeah, that was that. Just, you know, I'm given the confirmation. So I still have an element of control, but all I'm doing is giving a confirmation. And, you know, you take pride on, you know, trying to get that sort of thing done as quickly as possible. I could enter 1,000 things onto a spreadsheet, and, you know, accountants love spreadsheets, not beat around the bush. But they quite easily could be, you know, 10 things wrong. And then I've got to look at every single item. So I've got to almost duplicate 1,000 pieces of work. And, you know, I mentioned earlier about my time at the client and adding everything up time and time again. And, you know, what I really learned from that is that I can put things into a calculator quite quickly. No real skill in doing so. And I'd say that, you know, that client's budget they had at the time would have been better served having saved their time on automation. It would have been better served having more reliable information, having it more quickly, and then using the rest of their budget perhaps to have a valuable conversation with their accountant or partner, or, you know, or even if it's, you know, we talk about budget in terms of financial terms, it might be that they've got time constraints, and then they can have that better quality conversation with their business manager and the bank and, you know, marketing, and, you know, anyone that can potentially help their business that's not bogged down in looking at spreadsheets or cash books for hours on end. And I think that the real point there is quicker, it's more efficient, it works out cheaper, whether it's a cost out of the business or not. As I alluded to earlier, can you afford not to do it? Because you, as the main person driving your business, has a lot more value than, you know, writing down numbers to put into a VAT return.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's obviously, as you mentioned, it's not something which, you know, I initially thought of. That automation works whether you're using a third party like yourself or you're doing it on your own. It really does make a huge difference, I think. And so, yeah, some really interesting points there, Lee. Thank you so much. And that leads us nicely into Ali, what you'd like to discuss in terms of what we can offer from Tide to our members when it comes to bookkeeping.
Yeah, so Tide, of course, comes to this bookkeeping problem from a totally different angle, right? So we're, you know, Tide's mission is to save small businesses time and money. We don't think like a bank, we think like a company trying to solve financial admin. So, you know, we're born out of the frustration that small business owners have and all that requires. As Lee's been kind of alluding to, running a business means choosing the difficult path and spending more time running your business sometimes than doing what you went into the business for. Whether that be end of year rushes, whether that be invoices being done over the weekend, but being done in the evening, this time drain distracts you from growing your business. So with a banking service that's solely focused on trying to solve this problem. Now, when we kind of were looking at this, I can tell you, bookkeeping quickly emerged as something that was a real time drain. So we know already that the average UK small business owners, the average UK small business owner spends about a month and a half every year on financial admin. And when we looked at this a little bit further, we saw that more than half of our members still handle physical receipts. We call them shoe boxes. These are people with brown envelope bags for receipts, train tickets, and the like. We have these paper records that they maintain, and a further 20% have the same sort of thing, but all over their kind of Windows desktop in folders. They're kind of the digital shoe box. What they really haven't done is kind of digitize them and start having digital records. And this is a significant hindrance to bookkeeping. So look, these kind of problems, financial admin is a bit of a tricky subject. You know, they aren't necessarily complicated tasks, but they're time consuming and unfamiliar. And there can be significant consequences if they're done incorrectly. So what can Tide do to help this? We also know that, it's very interesting to see the survey results coming in, because a lot of the people on this call, which is true for a lot of our members, are self-employed or have one or two, employees. Also, people tend to be doing it themselves, right? They might have an accountant for compliance reasons, but they don't necessarily have an accountant or bookkeeper helping them with all their financial admin. We also know that while there are a lot of tools out here to help you, the Expensifies, the receipt banks like in this world, quite often they don't really help the smaller business. The smaller business ends up doing everything themselves. So I've just done a bit of a monologue over this kind of piece of text you're seeing in front of you, but this is kind of really where we concluded. To help businesses with bookkeeping, what we realized we need is a simple, integrated way for our members to keep track of their expenses, categorize their transactions, make notes for their accountants and so on while they're on the go, and for this to work with their existing workflows, right? Actually, Kieran, if you hop to the next slide, I can show you, actually no, if you sit to the next slide, I can show you what I mean by this. So look, this is how we try and solve the problem at the moment. So of course we have our app, and this person you can see has spent £3.55 on the post office. What we do is we allow you, of course, to capture receipts on the go. We have a desktop app where you can drag and drop your receipts in and leave notes for your accountants and the like. And you can also share email attachments with Tide. This is actually a feature that not too many people know about, but if you're using Tide, you can open an attachment in your email from your mobile, tap Share To, and it will automatically send it to Tide for it to match to your transactions. And finally, we have this feature that we launched earlier this year called the Receipt Importer, which I want to show you a bit of a demo about now. So let's go to the demo if we can, Mo. So like, we know that a lot of people, when they're kind of brown paper bag users, you've got to imagine you've got a professional contractor or the like, who's kind of on a train down from Edinburgh, having done their kind of IT consultancy for the week. And they've got their train tickets, their kind of meal tickets, all the rest of it, and it's just sort of sat there by their laptop as they take the train down. Now, what we want to encourage people to kind of digitize the receipts and bring them into Tide, we've built the Receipt Importer. So we've got our member, you can see they spent some money on Sainsbury's, at Pret, Tost and so on, the kind of typical expenses. And what they're going to do is they're going to open up the Receipt Importer, they're going to select the various receipts they might have or take photos of them right there, and then send them to Tide. Now what Tide did there, very quickly, was we scanned the receipt, we picked out the information, Sainsbury's, date, the amount and so on, and what we've done is we've matched it to the transaction you saw earlier on the timeline. Now that the member kind of confirms this, they'll sort of tap it. What we can do is we can match this receipt to the transaction without you having to go in and file it yourself. So what we're trying to do here is for you to really just give your paperwork to Tide for us to organize it. And as you can see here, the attachment's been added to the transaction, and we categorized the transactions and meals, which is, of course, very useful information for someone like Lee. That's you as the account owner, giving all the information you have. This is a meal, actually, when I was kind of working up in Edinburgh, for meals, etc., and that's the kind of input that Lee needs or a bookkeeper needs to do the book. So if we hop to the next slide, Mo. This is kind of the picture here. I've sort of shaded here in dark blue the things we have at the moment. As you can see, you're able at the moment to export this information either as CSV statements, or of course your organizer receipts and invoice. We'll create a file for you. Something we're working on presently is integration to accountancy software. So not only is this information within Tide, but it's automatically pushing into Xero. So Lee or anyone else, or yourself, of course, can be doing your bookkeeping in tasks within Xero. This really kind of completes the circle. We help you digitize your financial records. We also pass them over to your accountant if needed. As you can see, we're also looking on the inside of things. We're also looking at different ways we can help you get your digital receipts into Tide. For that, firstly, we're looking at an inbox, so you can forward any documents you might have, but also team expenses. So give all the tools I've shown you here to your team members, so your employees can do the same. It can be adding the expense items they go, using Receipt Importer and the like, all of which, of course, then funnels into Tide, and you can pass to your accountant and the like. Okay, shall we skip now, Matt? So I want to kind of indulge myself really by talking a little bit more about how we think about this problem at Tide. So longer term, we know that bookkeeping is just one of a number of different processes, which is quite siloed for a business owner. You tend to be, we find that people who raise invoices, these very different tasks, keeping track of your expenses, raising invoices, understanding your tax liability, and like at the moment, very siloed, they're very disconnected. And our goal as a company, as Tide, is to use the various different pieces of data to help businesses orchestrate more processes. So I've got an example here of Francis, who's an architect. And on the next slide, Mo, you can see the sorts of like connectivity chains we're trying to build. So let's assume Francis here. I'm just going to walk you through this kind of convoluted example. It's purely illustrative and sort of represents the maximum possible connectivity Tide could be supporting, but I hope it makes the point. So Francis here is going to pay for building supplies on her Tide card. You can see next she uses Tide's receipt importer to match that receipt to card spend, so she has a digital record of it. From here, we can actually help Francis raise an invoice. So she might want to kind of pass on that cost to one of her sort of clients. And so she can raise an invoice directly from that expense item. Now, imagine she raised that invoice and 30 days later it hasn't been paid. Through Tide, we know when things have been paid, of course, because we are the bank. We can tell when money's moving in and out. And so we can automatically be chasing that invoice when it hasn't been paid. Let's imagine things get worse. We're now 60 days. Our cash flow projection tool could be highlighting that you might have a cash shortfall at the end of the month if this isn't paid. And we can provide you the option of, let's say, factoring the invoice, so selling that invoice to help boost your working capital. All right, all things goes well. Francis' invoice is actually paid. Now, again, because we have the bookkeeping data, we know the VAT treatment for that particular transaction. So what we can be doing is when that invoice is paid, automatically siphon funds into a VAT liability pot for you to help manage your cash flow. This is something that Lee alluded to earlier. It's a key part of bookkeeping is making sure that you know what the tax man, the VAT man is going to come around the corner at the end of the quarter and ask you to return. So Tide can be automatically siphoning those funds into that liability. And then of course, all this information, there's no reason for it to be kind of disconnected. We can be bundling it together, handing it to your accountant in a way that means that these bookkeeping processes are much easier and your accountant's much better informed. Okay, so I think that kind of, as I say, a bit of a convoluted example, but kind of shows you how we think about these problems.
Great, thanks, Ollie. I think the interesting point for me on that was the when I talked earlier about my favorite parts, or the parts of the account, is that you can have the subcategories in the account, and then this can automatically be set up to get the right VAT into one of those as well, right?
That's right, yes. So we allow you to, of course, to enter the VAT amount for different transactions. And that's useful for our VAT Manager product, where you can be keeping track of your VAT liability and even filing your VAT returns through Tide. In the future, we'll work on building better kind of analytics for automatically categorizing your VAT treatment transaction. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting, and hopefully give our attendees something to think about and another reason to become a Tide member. So we're going to move on now to sort of hints and tips and resources section. I'm just going to put the links to these 4 points that Lee is going to talk about into the chat room. They should be there now. And I said Lee is going to take us through these resources and why they're useful and important to you guys. And I think he has some other tips that he'd like to share with you as well.
Thanks, Ewan. So yeah, in effect, I think we've all looked at probably different accounts packages. There's obviously the natural spreadsheet, write it down in a cash book, and then we're looking at more recently cloud-based applications taking the industry a little bit by storm, because what they can do and what that technology can do is save that time and create that automation opportunity. At A4G, we are partners with Xero, one of the cloud-based apps which Ali alluded to, in terms of how the link's trying to get the data over, and I think that's very much one of the top apps. The priority really for owner-managed businesses, I'd say we want to grow, but what does growth look like? Does growth look like a lot of stress and a lot more work for actually not getting a lot more cash in? One example of that could be you could delve into a slightly different area, a little niche or expertise. And for example, that might not prove to be the market that you thought it might have been. And you put all this extra effort in, you might be up in the turnover, but the cost of servicing those additional customers or clients might outweigh the income that you're getting. So I think, with bookkeeping, with that automation, we can also introduce a tracking. So you can track by customer. How much profit do I make on this job? You know, if I've got a number of different sites, how's that branch comparing to this branch? That there are, you know, a whole host of opportunities. And if you've got people, you have sales managers, what's their turnover compared to the colleague who's sitting 2 desks away? You know, there's all this different information that can be brought out of the system. And I think, you know, more recent automation gives a little bit more time to consider that and make better business decisions. In terms of A4G Corona Business, that's not us advocating anything like that. It's our coronavirus business hub, and as Kieran's alluded to, the links in the chat. I think we're probably up to about 100 articles. At the very start of the pandemic, we were pushing daily articles into everyone's inbox. That's cut back a little bit more now, and I think that's a transition in the way businesses are starting to recover. So at the very outset, it was almost like survival, and now it's a little bit more revival and how we're going to get back into the workplace, how we're going to get back into some sort of business normality, whatever that might look like. And in terms of the one thing which I see that small businesses do, they go about their daily business, they're providing that product or service to their customers, but they're sort of necessarily only got half an eye on the cash flow. You know, if we look at it in quite a crass manner, you're working for free until such point as that invoice is paid, or even worse, you incurred cost to service that client, and therefore you're operating at a loss until such time as that money's in the bank. So my top tip would be sort of just to go little and often in terms of your bookkeeping if you're doing it on your own. Get everything in digital format as quickly and as efficiently as possible, like the receipt capture can do for you. Shoe boxes are for shoes, dustbin bags are for rubbish, not for receipts. And I speak for the whole industry. We'll be forever grateful if you avoid passing those sort of things to us. And obviously, I consider outsourcing. It is a cost. It is an extra bill to the business, but is it actually leveraging your time to do something that's of much better value? That would be my sort of summary of top tips there. But yeah, feel free to have a look at any of those links and drop us a line if you want to discuss anything that's on there.
Great, thank you, Lee. Those are really useful links and really useful tips as well. I'm sure the attendees will be clicking on those links that are in the chat room, as we mentioned. So we have a Q&A session coming up in a couple of minutes. So do remember to get your questions in. I have a couple there, but obviously we'd love to have some more. But before we get on to the Q&A session, I've just gone to the next slide. I wanted to just give you a bit more information about Tide and what we do. And if you are new to us, please do remember to head over to our website and have a look and sign up if you want to become a member. If finding your own way to the website is a bit too much effort, then we're here to help. Over the next couple of days, you will receive an email from us. In that email, there'll be a link to rewatch this webinar, so you can share that with your team or whoever you want to. And if you're not already one of our 200,000 members, there'll also be a link in that email allowing you to sign up and start saving yourself some time and money. All you'll need to do is click that link, download the wonderful Tide app that I talked to you about earlier, follow the really easy instructions, and then you'll be able to start using Tide for all your business banking needs. For all of links to previous webinars and information about upcoming events, please visit our blog site and our events page, links to which I'll put into the chat room now. Let's do that now while I'm thinking about it. There they are. We also, of course, have a wonderful YouTube channel. So please find the link to that along with all of our social channels in the chat room too. So go visit those, subscribe, like and follow us and stay up to date with what we're doing at Tide. And all the information is in the chat room there for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, then do please hit the subscribe button at the bottom. Thank you for finding us. And while you're there, have a look through the playlist and look at all of our other webinars that are there for you to look at. If you have any comments or things you want to say to us, put those in the comments section. We'd really like to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future webinars or speakers you would like us to get on a panel, we're really open to hearing your suggestions for that. And for those of you who are watching live, don't feel left out. Immediately after the end of this webinar, as soon as I hit end, there will be a link on your screen to a survey about the sort of topics you'd like us to cover or speakers you'd like us to get in. So do, if you have time, please take 5 minutes and just answer those questions for us. We'd really like to know what you'd like to hear from us in the future. Wonderful. So all those links are in the chat room. Check those out. And we'll get on with some questions now. We have a couple in at the moment. So if you have any more, do please send those in. One that came in quite early, and Ali wonderfully answered it on the Q&A room, but I think it might be interesting for everybody to see as well. Was the question was, can you have more than one Tide account if you have more than one business and like the Tide layout? Ali, if you wouldn't mind just maybe voicing your answer that you gave to the questionnaire on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So it was an enthusiastic response because I remember,
no, it's fine.
I remember when we built this feature. It was good fun. So yes, we have a feature which we call multi-business, which lets you add and associate more than one business with a Tide app. So basically what that allows you to do is, let's say you manage 2 companies, or maybe you are a sole trader whilst also being the director of another company. What you can do is add multiple businesses and then switch between them with these. So you have the same sort of layout, the same sort of app, and you can just kind of switch between your various different companies. Now, if you want to do this yourself, if you go to navigate to the More menu within Tide, and there's a button which says Add or Switch Business. From here, you can go through the onboarding process again. So sort of entering some information and create a new bank account for your business. Or, of course, once you've added one, that's where you can switch between the different businesses.
Okay.
It's a pretty popular feature. I think, gosh, a good 10,000 businesses, 10,000 of our members use this multi-business functionality. We have a lot of serial entrepreneurs.
And that's what we like, right? So that's great. We had just a comment that I wanted to bring up as well. We had Samuel at the very start was just saying hi, and it was his very first time along to the webinar. So Sam, really nice to have you along. And if you're not a Tide member, we look forward to welcoming you as a Tide member soon. We have an anonymous question which came in, and it's: is there a great website to know what kind of stuff you can and can't claim under business expenses? I guess, Lee, that might be one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we want to get to the real nitty gritty, HMRC put their guidance, which is pages and pages of it, but I wouldn't recommend anyone that looks at that unless they're suffering from a bout of insomnia. But sort of have a look at our website. We've got a number of articles about the sort of basics, do's and don'ts at A4G. Alternatively, give someone a call and they'll just be able to run through those specifics for you.
Okay, fantastic. That's really good. I'm just going to run our final poll. It's just about the quality of this webinar. If you have a couple of seconds, I'd really appreciate you to take a second to answer that poll. Another question came in from another anonymous attendee. Do I still need a bookkeeper if I use the Tide Import Receipt app?
That's a good question. Maybe I can start and Lee will correct me. So look, bookkeepers exist because they add a lot of value, right? They will help you keep accurate financial records that, well, are fully accurate, that you know and can trust are accurate. And also, as Lee's been mentioning, this is a time-consuming task and something that can be quite easily outsourced, right? So in theory, the receipt importer tool we built to help members who want to do the bookkeeping themselves, and it can certainly aid you in doing so. Now, it's sort of your decision as a business owner how you want to do this yourself. So I think I can say it will help. What I'd also say is, if you want absolute peace of mind and you want to know, and you want to know that your financial records are being kept correctly, then a bookkeeper can add a huge amount of value there. But Lee, I'll pass on to you because this is very much your bread and butter, and I'll spend.
Absolutely fine, thanks, Ali. I think, yeah, it's sort of one of those things that the receipt capture is enhancing and really helping the ability to provide the service that a bookkeeper will provide. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier on is that people traditionally have kept storage units, top of the wardrobes, wherever it might be in all their previous records. HMRC have confirmed that if the receipt is held in digital format, then that's still always held appropriately for the purposes of if you had a VAT inspection or a tax inspection. They have confirmed that that's appropriate. So it's literally snap it, upload it, bin it, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, there's still some bits and pieces to do because there are some items that will require recording, such as invoices, etc., that might not have gone through the bank account yet, or if you've incurred some personal expenses that you shouldn't just lose them because you paid cash out for them, for example. So it's a real help with the apps and what's coming through, but there is a little bit of additional work required, and to just check that your reconciliations are done and you're paying the right VAT and that sort of thing as well.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, guys. Samuel just got back in touch saying he is a member and he's loving the app so far. So that's really great to hear. Samuel, really thanks for letting us know. And he also just asked, is A4G owned by Tide? No, it's not, but they are one of our accounting partners. So that's why we have them on this fantastic webinar. And another question came in from Eddie, and he's asked, or they've asked, can the app adapt to a change in structure from sole trader to LTD?
Yeah, so Eddie, if you reach out in app, our member support team can help you with this. I'm afraid I'm a little bit out of touch on exactly whether or not they'll be able to convert your account from a sole trader to a limited business account. They certainly do regularly manage people who are incorporating and become a limited to registered business. So I forget I'm afraid I don't know the exact process, but if you reach out in app, someone can guide you through it.
Perfect.
We do it quite a lot, as you can imagine.
Great. So yeah, Eddie, just get into the app and reach out to us that way, and we'll be able to help you as quickly as we can. Another question's come in. Another anonymous question? What happens if you get to the end of the tax year and you have a discrepancy between income and expenditures and the amount of money in your bank? Lee, is that sense to you?
That's my bag. I think I alluded to earlier, the bank statement doesn't lie. That is a reflection of what's gone in and what's gone out. And you might put something to the wrong code, but effectively what the ins and outs are, surplus or deficit for the year. So if I was just to say, you've got your income expenditure, and the only thing that hasn't gone through the bank is that last invoice you raised at the very end of the tax year that you've not been paid for. Now, as a bookkeeper and accountant, we should include that to represent that took place in that financial year. But of course, it wouldn't drop through to the bank account until such point as your customer might pay. And that's not necessarily to say that they've paid late, but it could be that it's just that arbitrary cut off, that year-end photograph of what's happened. The time of the income coming in might just have been a little bit later than that, but the work's been done beforehand. So in that circumstance, your profit would be a little bit higher than what's in your bank account, and then the following year that could switch around and be slightly lower.
Okay. That's
not
really helpful.
Not uncommon to have it that your profit for the year doesn't equal the change in your bank balance. It's very rare for that to happen in
okay. Cool. So hopefully that helps you, whoever it was that asked that question. Thank you for asking that. We haven't got any more questions at the moment. I have maybe just got one, and give somebody else some time to type one in. So just a quick one for you, Lee. I guess it's a big question, but maybe hopefully you can answer it. When you have maybe a new small business coming to you looking for bookkeeping, or has maybe started bookkeeping and accountancy on their own and having a bit of an issue, what are you finding are the main issues that they're having when they're first starting out, and what do you think are the main points to help them overcome those?
No, good question. I think everyone's got sort of great intentions that I want to keep on track of this, and I think people just run out of time because their business is, sometimes owning a business is the best thing that someone can do. It fits a lifestyle and everything, but with that comes extra responsibility that you could be managing an employee, it could be managing that finance function. So in that respect, we see a lot of people that just can't necessarily give it that attention that it needs, and therefore it's just a bit of a catch-up mission. And then it finds that actually, it didn't need to be spending that time on there. So it's a case of just crack on and let someone else do it. That can, it's their job is to give it that time and attention, really.
Okay, perfect. Okay, wonderful. Ali, did you have anything else you wanted to add at this stage? Because we're coming to the end of the session now.
Nothing from me, no.
Okay, wonderful. Well, listen, quick reminders from me. Do keep an eye out for the email that will be coming your way after this session, and with information on how to become a Tide member and how to rewatch this session, as well as all the links in the chat room as well to our social channels. And a reminder to, if you have time, take part in the post-event survey, which will come into your come onto your screen as soon as we finish this section. But yeah, all that's left for me to do now is thank Ali very much indeed for your time, and Lee, thank you very much indeed for your time and effort as well. I think this has been a really interesting webinar for everybody. The attendees have stayed on right to the very end of this session, so thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon at a future Tide webinar event, and please keep an eye on the events page and social channels for the list of those that are coming up. And so once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Cheers.